I call the town council workshop meeting of August 18th, 2025 to order at 6:30 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Mitchum,
Here. Can you speak right into the mic, please?
Elgin,
Here.
Bailey,
Here.
Debner,
Here.
Dennis,
Here.
Lasher,
Here.
Unger.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So we're going to start off tonight with our public comment period. There's something new about this for remote participants. If you are participating remotely and you want to make a comment, you need to sign up with your name and address in the chat. And the clerk, when called upon, when she sees that, the clerk will let you know that it's your time to speak and will unmute you. Because we were hacked at one of our most recent meetings, we've changed from a Zoom meeting format to a webinar format, thanks to our new interim clerk. And so that's a little different than how it used to be. So just for summary there. For workshop comments, David, could you please get the spreadsheet or the sign up sheet for please? For workshop comments, our rules say that you need to sign up and share your contact information, and then we'll call on you in order. I'll start with people in the room first, and then we'll go to remote participants. And the comments during this workshop portion of the meeting, thank you very much, must be on the topic of the workshops. So our workshop tonight has 3 topics, or 4. We're going to have a presentation from our town accountant about the June financial statements. We're going to be talking about our purchasing policy that we're drafting and working on. It's a draft right now. We're going to be talking about town facilities and properties. And we're going to be talking about the mayor's pay for the next incoming mayor. So anybody can sign up and speak on those topics during this public comment period. The first person that we have signed up for this workshop public comment period is Seneca Pelton. Can you come up to the front? You'll just say your name. You say whether or not you're a resident, and then you share your comment, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Yes.
I'm Seneca Pelton at 4352 Eaton Street, and I'm a resident. I'm here tonight to talk about the mayor's position and what's been happening with our small town. I believe that the mayor's position needs to be a qualified person to run for that position. I know it can be anybody in the town of Mountain View, but they need to meet some qualifications to be able to hold that position. And whoever runs for the mayor needs to be qualified, and they need to have a checklist
Let's turn this up a little bit.
that the council has made and come up with. The mayor's position is a real and serious position. That person represents, follows, and implements the ideas of the council and the people of Mountain View. The next mayor should receive compensation for the office and be paid accordingly and receive benefits so that person can focus solely on the position of being a mayor. We have seen what past mayors have done, and they were lacking in skills and foresight. We finally have a town that is a town with a good administration, the mayor, town council, police force, public works, staff, and legal. When I first started coming to these meetings, I came because the town was afraid that we were going to be taken over by Denver. And so they started coming up with everything to actually make us a town. And everything that's included with the council and everything like that. And we've come a long way in this small town. And we have our problems here, of course, but they're now playing catch up as to what previous mayors did not do. And it's costing a lot of money. And so there's a lot of people that seem to be very upset about that, but that is something that needs to be done. And whoever the next mayor is needs to be able to go forward with the town and just be the mayor and not focus on anything else. That's it.
Thank you very much for your public comment.
Huh?
I can't see the clock. If we could make it just so that both of us can see it, that'd be helpful. Oh, Charlene? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Nancy?
Hello. Sorry.
Thank you for speaking right into the mic so
Of
that
course.
everybody can hear.
Okay. Thank you for everybody for being on the council. Not you. My name is Nancy Bucci. I live on Benton 4146, and I've been a homeowner in the area for over 10 years. And truth be told, I think that I have been asleep at the wheel, and I have been asleep at the spending, the amount of spending that this town is doing. From looking at the budgets and please tell me if I'm out of line and not speaking on topic. This is my first time here. The June statement and the budget, and then the flyer that we got the other day all has to do with budgeting. You, Mayor, sent us all an email and said it was very inaccurate, which is unfair to the people that thinks it's accurate. You haven't even given us why you think it's inaccurate, and I feel like we are owed that. You want to say that these numbers that came off of the website are inaccurate? Tell us why. And you owe us this. I did want to speak on Saturday. However, you stopped the meeting an hour early. And so no one was here to actually make a public comment because I would have requested that these answers were today. Purchasing policy. We all know that we bought 3 homes. We bought 3 homes in the area, 3 years. One of them has been inhabitable. It's right here. Said there was going to be a playground. There's no playground. There's no budget as to fix it, not fix it. The other one's uninhabitable. We've been told by a designer that it's going to take 400 to 800 per square foot to fix these places. Where's that in the budget? There's nothing in the budget for that. Facilities. The EV charger, if this pamphlet is anywhere close to how much this EV charger costs for a police station that doesn't have an EV vehicle, is preposterous. Can people use it? We see a Tesla on it every day, not every day, sorry, but we see a Tesla on it, but can I use it with my EV vehicle? We don't even, when did this happen? When were we told? I honestly think there should be a fundraising policy for, I don't know what the amount should be. Maybe that's us as a community, but there needs to be a policy. You cannot, you're not a real estate agent. You're not an investor. We are a town of residents that want this place to survive. And at this rate, it's not going to. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. No audible interruptions, please. Nancy, let me ask you, would you prefer a follow-up from staff on your questions, or would you prefer to have that conversation at the next budget workshop? Okay.
Residents, not just me.
Thank you for your input. The next person who signed up was Jeff Kitty.
I'm Jeff Kitty. I'm a former mayor, and I am running this next election, providing I get enough signatures. What I would like to say is when I was mayor, I got paid $6,000 approximately a year. Okay. It's gone up exponentially. We ran the town with very little money. The money that you have right now was because of the groundwork that we laid. Okay. I agree with the real estate purchases should have been put up to a public hearing before they were bought. So we could have scrutinized it. As far as mayor's salary, out of line, period, out of line.
Thank
That's
you
all
for
I
your
got to say.
Would you like a follow-up?
Oh, I think we're going to have a follow-up. It's just,
So no,
I would wait if it were me. Before you vote on a raise, I would wait till after the election.
please, no audible interruptions. Please, that's out of line. No audible interruptions. Would you
Okay.
like a follow-up?
You bet.
Okay, I will follow up with you. The next person is Dodie.
Dodie Dosh, 4112 Benton. I know you're all sick of seeing me up here because I'm up here all the time. I am not in favor of raising the mayor's salary because we're being compared to Denver, Pueblo, Colorado Springs, which are cities. The average in Colorado of the mayors is 50,000. For cities, it's 90. And we are a town of 512 square blocks. I would prefer my tax money to go to a qualified, trained, experienced, part-time town administrator and also a clerk with those same qualifications. We would not have to have a new mayor every 4 years or every 8 years or whatever it is, come in and have to learn how to administer, learn when things need to be done, learn all that stuff. We would already have somebody. So that's kind of my opinion of that. And also in the packet, I quote, "How can we communicate this decision to residents so they understand it's about the role and not any individual?" I would like the council to remember that because at the last workshop, it was all about the individual mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Dodie, would you like, it sounds like you didn't have any questions, so you don't need a follow-up, right? Okay. The next person is Carl Mitchum.
Carl Mitchum at 5461.
Can you speak
West-
right into the mic, please? You can hold the mic out of there if you.
5461 West 41st Avenue. I've lived in Mountain View for a fairly long time. I've worked with 4 different mayors. Mayor Betty was mayor here when I first came, Mayor Kitty, Mayor Glenn, and now Mayor Emily. I have also been an administrator, a manager, a small construction company, director of departments at 3 different universities. And so I have some sense of the amount of work that it takes to run even a small operation. I mean, my construction company was only 5 people, but it took a lot of work to get things working well. I think we have a great town. As I've said before, I think it's great to have a police department that's right here available to us. I really respect all the work that volunteers on the council do. That's really a lot of work too. And I think I endorse our neighbor over here's statement about, I think we really do need just pay for a mayor who's doing so much work now that has had to be done in the past. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like a follow-up? Okay.
I think my sentiment is very similar to Seneca.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room who would like to sign up to comment on the workshop topics? Then we will move to the remote participants. Do we have anybody who's participating remotely who put their name and number in, or, okay. Thank you very much to everybody who's attending tonight and took time out of your day to comment. I know that that takes time and effort and energy, and we appreciate it. We are going to move on to the June financial statement review by our town accountant, Lorraine Trotter, who is in the room with us. Thank you for joining us today. And you could take that out if it's easier. It just makes it so much better for our recording if people speak right into that mic. And actually, I could probably loosen, David, we could probably loosen her cord a little bit better so that she could. That one might. I think we had it all wrapped up. So Lorraine is going to review the June financials with us, and moving forward, what we're going to be doing is putting the monthly financial statements into the full packet so that we wanted council to be able to understand how to read a financial statement before we started doing that. So that's the purpose of having Lorraine with us tonight. Thank you for being here, Lorraine.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Can you folks hear me in the audience? Oh, thank you. I'm here to talk about the June financial statements, and you have them in your packet. I don't know if they can be displayed on the screen as I go, but the first page of your financial statements each month shows the cash you have in all of the various checking or savings accounts that the town has. And at the end of June, the town had over $3,200,000 in its various bank accounts. At the bottom of that first page, it shows how that cash is allocated or owned by the various funds that the town operates. And the town is required to keep certain monies in separate funds, and the town has 4 funds. So you'll see that allocation to general fund that shows at $2,697,000 is how much the general fund owns of the 3.2 million total in the bank accounts. And so if you go to the next page, which is the general funds balance sheet, go back up to this page 2 of the report. That's good. And perhaps you can enlarge that. It's hard to read those numbers from here. That $2,697,000 is the first line in the general funds balance sheet. And it'll be the same for each fund. Their share of all the combined cash is shown in each fund. So the general fund has over 2.6 million in cash. It also has some receivables coming in from various collectors, agencies at the state that are owed, as well as receivables for sewer and trash bills, and has total assets of $3 million as of the end of June. And it only had liabilities in the next section down of $208,000 at the end of June. The fund balance, which shows as equity, is the beginning fund balance at the beginning of 2025. So the general fund started 2025 with $3.2 million. So far this year, it has decreased by $317,000 per the budget plan. And you end up with total fund equity of $2,885,000. Keep that amount in the fund balance there, the $3.2 million in mind as we go to the next page, which is the general fund revenues. And the general fund is the chief operating fund of the town. All of the general routine operations of all the town departments are shown here. There's just a couple of funds that have specified revenues that have to have their own funds to track those revenues, which we'll get to next. And then there's the wastewater and storm drainage enterprise fund, which is operated like a business. So almost all of your activity is in the general fund, except for the wastewater. So looking at these revenues, you see that it's tax-based, as is the case with all municipalities. This report shows your year-to-date in each of the previous 2 years. So at June 30th in 2023, tax revenues were $1,024,000. At June 30th in 24, they were $941,000. The period actual means what came in during June of 2025. But the year-to-date actual is through June 30th of 2025, $794,000. So this amount is 44.3% of what was budgeted. You look at the budget in the next column, and the last column is the percent of budget that the year-to-date actual represents. Through June, you've gotten most of your 2/3 of your property taxes. The rest of it typically comes in July. And you have about 44% of your total budget showing there for most of your revenues. Licenses and permits generally pick up during the summer when more remodeling, et cetera, is done. But that through June, they were at 20% of budget. Court revenues were already at 75% of what was budgeted. So they're coming in stronger than the amounts budgeted. For fines, charges for services were at 72%. So again, but those are billed in advance. So it's not surprising they're a little more than half of what you would budget for the year. The next page shows intergovernmental revenues, where various state revenues get shared with municipalities generally based on population or other formulas that relate to the type of money coming in. And your intergovernmental revenues are at about 20% of what was budgeted for the year. It comes in, some of them quarterly, some of them monthly, some of them annually. Grants, you had hoped to get a DOLA grant for $80,000. That has not happened yet, and maybe it won't, but it usually would have construction or something that would be driving that. And so those expenditures either wouldn't have occurred yet, or the request for reimbursement hasn't come through yet. You've earned interest of $135,000 so far this year, which is a good amount. And so you've got total fund revenues at 43%, and 50% of the year has elapsed. So you're close to your revenue forecast, but I'm not having received certain items like the grant at this point. The next page shows the revenue, the expenditures in the general fund. And I won't go through each line item here, but I'll go to the bottom line of each department. So for the general government department, you've spent 46.3% of what your budget is for the year. You've spent $579,000 so far this year, which is very close to what you spent in 2024. The next page shows the court expenses. They're under 50% also, even though 50% of the year has elapsed. They're at 41.7%, and the budget was at 66 grand. And remember, the revenues for court, which we already looked at, were coming in more than the budget, and the expenses are less than the budget. The public safety budget is at 48.6%, so very close to 50% after half the year has elapsed. Public works is at 35% of the budget, partially because there's some maintenance projects that are budgeted here for street and alley and sidewalk that generally takes place in the warmer months, which have had no expenditures against them so far.
Would that be related to the DOLA grant? I can't remember why John put the DOLA grant in there. Yeah.
Park maintenance is about at 30%. And again, all these, most of these expenses elapse during the warmer months. And then trash is right around 50%, 53.1% for the year. And the final page shows capital projects are only at 7.6% of what was budgeted. There was a fair amount budgeted for town hall remodel, for new street and boundary signs, for repaving streets and alleys that has not yet been expended. So total fund expenditures are at 45% of the budgeted amounts. Remember, the revenues were at 43%, I believe, of budgeted amounts. And so you had budgeted to draw down your fund balance this year for some of these capital projects by about $600,000, and also for some other operational expenses. And you've drawn it down by $317,000 so far this year. I asked you when we were back on the balance sheet and looking at the fund balance of the 3.2 million to keep that figure in mind. And I'd like to go back to the revenue page, which is page 4. And you see that your budget for revenues at the bottom of page 4 was 2.4 million. So you have a fund balance of 3.1 million, and I'm sorry, 3.1 million, 3.2 million. That's over 130% of your revenues. So the care that we've talked about you having with keeping enough in your fund balance to supplant any lost revenue should you have a flood or a fire or a tornado or something that damages your tax base, you have more than enough to get you through replacing a full year's revenues. You have 1.3 years of revenues in your fund balance to help you if there's a catastrophe. And certainly you would begin getting FEMA or some other types of relief, insurance proceeds, et cetera. But you wouldn't have to wait for that in order to keep operating. And as I mentioned, the general fund is the general operations, and you are required to do a lot of the things in the general fund, not everything. You could cut some expenses and not do certain programs or whatever, but you have to be able to provide building inspection as things are rebuilt. You have to be able to provide police services to keep the town safe, especially during an emergency. You have to be able to keep operating, keep getting revenues, et cetera. So you have a good reserve there in that general fund balance still.
Can we remember the policy that we passed that said how much we should have in our general fund balance for unfortunate catastrophic event? I think it was 1 year that we
At the most, I think it was 1 year, and you have
passed. We
one-
deliberated back and forth, and then we adopted by resolution that we should have 1 year's worth of savings. And right now we have how much?
1.3.
Thank you.
Most cities and towns would be enviable to have more than 1 year. Most have a few months worth, less than half a year, like maybe 3 months worth. So you're in good shape there. And you've
Thank
done a lot of work over the years that I've seen to get there. Moving on to the next fund, on page 9 is the Conservation Trust Fund. And this is a fund that's required to track the shared revenues that come from the state lottery. They have to be kept separate and only used for parks or certain recreation purposes. And so they are. And you have on page 9 shows you that you've got a ending fund equity of $71,649.50. The next page shows that you're on track with the revenues you're receiving this year. You've got about half of the annual revenues so far that you're expecting, which are just 6,600, but you're letting them add up. You're not spending them as you go. You're letting them accumulate to that 71,000 now so that you could spend them on some future project for park purposes,
Like a playground?
like a playground.
Mhm.
The DOJ fund is next. That stands for Department of Justice. These revenues come through the Federal Department of Justice and they're for police services. They have to be kept separate, not just thrown in with the general fund, which also runs streets and parks and administration. And in this fund, there is $195,000 at the end of June. On page 12, it shows that so far this year, you've received $82,000. It's hard to forecast these monies because they are federal monies. It has to do with certain confiscations and things of that nature. And then they get doled back out to the participating jurisdictions based on various formula. And you never know when you're going to get them, when that doling is going to start. But so far this year, you've received $82,000. And the next page, 13, shows you've spent $21,000 worth. The budget was for 10,000, but I think because more money came in, it was decided to use some of those. And so you will need a supplemental appropriation before the year's over to amend this budget, or else those charges will have to be put back against the general fund and not left here. It shouldn't be a problem. And then the last fund is your wastewater and stormwater fund. And this is operated as a business where instead of using all these taxes and intergovernmental revenues to support the operations, you're charging the system users for the services that are provided for sewage collection and treatment and storm drainage. And each person gets a bill quarterly that benefits from that, and they pay for the services as delivered. So this fund has built up a fund balance, total equity of $1,194,000 through all time to June 30th, 2025.
I'm sorry, Lorraine, is this in addition to the general fund balance that we talked about that has a year 0.3?
Oh, yes. Each of these funds have their own fund balances, which I've been mentioning, and they have to be used for their own purposes. So this is always needing to be used for the wastewater and stormwater functions that the town is required to provide. The assets here also include lines, sewer lines, curbs and gutters, storm drainage, culverts, things of that nature, pump stations, whatever is needed for that operation. So it's not just money in the 1.19 million, but it is the value of your wastewater and stormwater system at the end of June. The next page shows revenues that have come in so far this year, and you've received 74% of the budgeted revenues. Often people do pay in advance for their sewer usage, so these revenues do come in a little early sometimes. But you've already gotten sewer fees that were much, well, you've got 74% of your revenues so far. Then the last page shows the expenditures in the wastewater and stormwater fund. And you've only spent 20% of what's budgeted here, partly because there are curb and gutter improvements of 42,000 that are budgeted, sanitary sewer operation and enterprise expenses, certain line items that have not yet been tapped and therefore have not yet been spent. But again, the construction and maintenance often takes place during the warmer months of the year. So with that, as from a financial standpoint, you seem to be on target from what you budgeted for 2025. You did, and you're doing what was in the budget, and I don't see any issues with that on any of the funds for what you had planned to do this year.
Thank you. So just for, this is a really good opportunity when we have our town accountant here, and we have a lot of community members who have expressed concerns about the budget. Do members of the council have questions for our accountant with regards to this presentation? Or need for clarification? Councilmember Algeen.
In our,
Yeah, please speak
So-
right into
excuse me.
that.
in our workshop on Saturday, there was a discussion about when a council member asked what was the area of concern, and she stated our administrative costs are high. Is this correct?
Yeah, so that's depending on what you mean by high. As far as your budget, you're within what was budgeted.
Okay.
But if you're comparing to other similar communities or pay rates of various individuals to others, then that I can't answer off the top of my head if they're high in comparison or not.
Thank you.
I think I should speak to that so that that's not misunderstood. And please correct me if I'm wrong, Charity, in what that statement was, but we budgeted. So the budget is the way in which council gives direction to staff to move forward, right? So the council at the beginning of the year says, we're going to appropriate these amounts of money and we want you to spend it to produce these services and hire these positions. So that's the budget. That's the direction for staff. Things change throughout the year. The budget that was made for 2025 included a town administrator. And so I think that's what our town clerk was noticing was that, but perhaps I was not understanding.
I think the specific question was where can you see cost savings?
Yes.
And so that's where I said would probably be the only place we could do a substantial cost saving.
Okay.
Based off of open positions now and how you would want to move forward with some of those as they were structured for 2025.
That makes sense to me as well. In most governmental budgets, the general fund is highly driven by the salaries of the people within it, rather than the enterprise fund where you have operations, treatment, conveyance of, big items. general governments is usually the staff doing the things, patrolling the streets, fixing the potholes, grading alleys, issuing permits, issuing licenses, preparing for council meetings. It's all personnel driven. The town has routinely utilized a survey we've been helped several years involved with to look at the pay rates for various employees and what they should be to attract and retain good employees. My recollection in last year's budget process was that there was some changes to what that had happened that weren't necessarily what had been initially anticipated. And I believe that town this year in its budget process wants to look back at those salaries and see if people are being paid at the right rates, if their range is set where it should be, if the top and bottom of the range is set where it should be.
The
And that would be
prevailing rate.
the prevailing rate,
Is
whether it's too high or moved from the median, that type of thing. So it may be time for something of that, or maybe just looking at it, it would be obvious. So that's the kind of thing that you can definitely look at in your budget process. And looking at, as I said, salaries and benefits is the main thing to look at with a general fund budget.
Thank you. Councilmember Debner?
So on page 4 there's the DOLA grant where we expected 80,000 in revenue. Could you maybe speak more to the status of that?
Coordinator Nugent?
That particular entry was in case we decided to move forward with doing some of the street and gutter work or street and alley work, which was budgeted at $65,000 that we are not doing this year. So there's no need to put in for the DOLA grant. So there won't be a DOLA grant.
Does that explain also then why our spending is a little low in that, where
The
it's
other
35
portion
or
of that
something?
was going to be for the amount that we did for the earlier study we did the RFP for,
Mhm.
and that was supposed to be part of the DOLA grant. Then I believe Administrator Beltran was going to do that. Don't know. I'm assuming that didn't happen.
Right. So we're 50% through the year and we're looking for those percentages to be roughly around 50% because staff have been directed by council through the budget process to spend this money throughout the year. And sometimes we have a reason for why it's a little lower or a little higher. But that's when you're talking about the percentages, that's what we're referring to. We're 50% through the year. We kind of expect to be 50% in revenue, 50% in expenditures. And when we're not, we want to understand why. Councilmember Lasher.
I just had a question. You mentioned earlier that most or a lot of towns would be very envious of our, fund balance. So I was hoping that maybe you could speak on that. And also, if you see anything in the budget that is not accounted for, something I just feel like there's a lot of distrust right now on the council, because the council is the ones who makes the decision with how we spend the money, not the mayor. So is there anything that you see that the council has done that would have such distrust in the community right now?
Well, I don't know that I see anything myself, except that your costs go up
Right.
and you're drawing down your fund balance. Now, when I first started with the town helping with the audit for the 2015, so 10 years ago, the town did not have good fund balances and the town lived on a wing and a prayer for many years preceding that, according to what I understood. And it's been through ardent effort to not overspend, to save, to keep growing the fund balance to the point where it was growing up to $5 million with an annual budget of about 1 million or less. And so you had 5 times the amount. And so those of us in municipal finance put forth the question, do you want to keep taxing the people this much and just growing that fund balance? Or do you want to lower taxes and not grow it anymore? Or do you want to use what you've grown in ways that you as a council believe will benefit the community? And my recollection from the budget process is that was the decision last year. We think it's time to pay our employees a good salary so we don't have as much turnover and we can attract and retain good employees. We feel it's time to take some steps to make some capital purchases or plans that will help benefit the community in the long run and the short one. And so it was determined to draw down that 5 million, so it's not so high, still have well more than 1 year's worth of revenues to keep you safe in case there were a calamity. And that is how I recognize it. It always alarms people when costs go up or when savings go down, but it's as a financial, person who does this for a living, I think it's also a problem if balances just keep going up and up and up and they're never used for what they were collected for. So it's finding that balance, finding the timing that makes sense. Sometimes you'll start a project and put it on hold and wait till another event or timing comes along that makes it better to move forward. But I don't have any financial concerns about the town unless you keep drawing it down and not making the good decisions each year. So looking at your budget each year and deciding where it's trending and where it's going is key. And looking at those salaries, which drive the general fund, and your capital needs, which drive your future, is a balancing act.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So we're already running just a little bit behind, but I think these kinds of conversations take the time that they take. Are there any further questions or comments from council before we move to our next item on the agenda?
I had one.
Just one moment. Let me see if anybody else on council who hasn't spoken yet. Councilmember Unger.
I was just impressed by the detail of this report.
Thank you.
I mean, there was a whole lot of things that were in there that I thought, gee whiz, so many, for a little town, so many niches and so many things that were mentioned. And thank you for the good job.
Oh,
And,
you're welcome. Thank you.
Charity, you as well.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So if I understand correctly, we should be receiving these types of reports moving forward every month. That is wonderful news. And I really welcome that information in our packets every month. So thank you.
You're welcome. We prepare them every month, every year, year in, year out, and usually have them ready. We try to have them ready in time for your council meeting. Sometimes if there's a holdup on getting information, it can be delayed. And that was why you don't have July's now, but we expect to hopefully start getting that information on a quicker basis.
Wonderful.
And we've got Councilmember Dennis. No, we'll move on to Councilmember Debner.
So I was just curious, since we have 1.3 years approximately of funding available to us in the event of like an emergency, I was just curious from what 40 to 50% of our revenue stream comes from the marijuana taxes that we have. So I was just kind of curious if we've evaluated or if you could speak to the potential impact if that industry was impacted on the budget, like long term.
Yes. Well, that is key for any municipality. They have key areas and it's usually sales tax. And in your case, it's more of the recreational marijuana, but also the general sales tax. So you have actually a budget for sales tax that's $1,015,000 and a budget for the recreational marijuana tax of $643,000. So that's no longer your primary revenue source. The sales tax in general is. And both of those revenues are coming in the 40% range through June. Usually you get more when you get the year-end Christmas months sales in there. So 40% in June is not worrisome at all. But over the years, if you look at those lines on page 3, you'll see that the sales and marijuana tax have trended down. And that's, again, not unusual for a small tax base. Right in a metropolitan area, where others, entities around you affect what comes to you because they are competitors for that. During 2023, you saw and 22 and the years of the COVID lockdown, you saw a surge in your sales tax and marijuana actually, but the sales tax because people were locked down and did not go to other jurisdictions to buy things at their stores. They ordered online, had them delivered to their homes, and therefore the point of sale was in Mountain View and you got more sales tax that way. If you want to start a push for that, order, and the town gets a sales tax, that's something to consider. There's other things to consider too about ordering versus shopping. But if you leave here and go to a store in Denver or Wheat Ridge or Lakewood, they will get the sales tax. So it's normal to see this trending down as people go out and shop in other places again. If we did a 10-year comparison, you'd see that you have overall an increase in the taxes that you've gotten, I think, in sales tax over time. Marijuana had a high point, and now it's kind of trending down to about 80% of what that high point was, but it's still coming in on budget.
Yes, Councilmember Lasher.
The council has been following this marijuana very closely, and we could see that it's trending down. And that's why we have been talking about ways to diversify our sales tax for a couple years now. And we're making the push to start these changes. So we're very aware of that. And we're trying to set up the town for not just tomorrow, for years to come by making diversity in our sales tax revenue.
Thank you.
Could it-
Councilmember Debner?
So I'm new. I guess I'm kind of wondering how exactly is council keeping an eye on those trends? Is it just more of a year-to-year budget approach, or is there any other closer looks?
So this is a question for staff that I think you talked with our town clerk about during the budget retreat. And we will continue to hear from you during our budget process, but let's table that question for now, because it really is something that staff are acutely aware of. And so I don't think we need to worry too much about it in terms of the June financials. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on council now in my second term now, and this is a conversation that we've been having since I started on council. So it's a continuation, but we are actually making steps by purchasing properties to hopefully develop in the future and bring in other revenue. We've made motions in that direction, but it's been a conversation item, like literally since the first day I've been on council.
Okay. So with that, let's move on to our next agenda item, which is we still have Lorraine Trotter with us for this next agenda item, which is about our purchasing policy. This is our second workshop on revising the town's purchasing policy. In the past, we haven't had a great purchasing policy. In fact, we've had not much of one at all. We've had in our code some very lacking. How would you say that?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces. Yeah, we've talked about previously how there was a lot of pieces missing with the authorization of purchasing in the town, and how the couple of lines of code that you currently have a lot of donut holes in them. So a lot of areas that just aren't mentioned at all. And so this purchasing policy that we've discussed a couple times now is trying to fill all those issues and set up a more robust system for how purchases are carried out.
Thank you. And then we're not actually in our regular meeting, we're not actually trying to adopt the purchasing policy tonight. We're just trying to have the discussion so that at the next meeting, we can adopt the purchasing policy ideally. When we have the second reading for the ordinance that will remove the sections from our code that are conflicting with this purchasing policy, we will make it effective upon adoption of the purchasing policy. So that way this purchasing policy will not take effect until the code removal of the inadequate sections that we do have won't be removed until we've actually gotten to a place where we're all in agreement. So the Finance Committee, which is Councilmember Algeen and our town accountant and myself and the treasurer, worked on the purchasing policy. In addition, we also incorporated Councilmember Debner's comments via a public record, a public meeting, so that we could notice it and include a third council member's comments and suggestions, because you do have some expertise in this area. So the draft that you have in your packet, then, this is sort of where we are right now. And we haven't yet heard from Lorraine in terms of how does she view it? What kind of input should where should we strengthen it? And how do you see this as a tool? Where are we in terms of making it a really good, robust direction for staff?
Thank you, Mayor. I thought that the draft was very complete and a very good policy as a good starting point. I reviewed most of it already, but not all of the bid requirement part yet, because it is fairly lengthy. But I thought that the policy itself was a step in the right direction, requiring very clearly and enumerating who has authority to make purchases, how the process goes, and when you have to get approval, what happens with with credit cards, what happens with contracts, what happens with IT services, things like that nature. So I thought it was very well that it hit all the topics, and it did so well. I made a few suggestions that we haven't had a chance to talk about ourselves yet, in some wording here and there. One suggestion not to attach forms that need to be used, but to say that they will be provided by the treasurer, so that treasurer can amend a form if it needs to be amended without changing the policy. That
makes
type of
really
thing.
good sense.
Yeah. But in general, I thought it was right on target. So I look forward to our chance to talk about it more, in more detail, but I think you're right. You're going in the right direction fast.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Does Councilmember Algeen want to share anything in regards to this, since you were also pivotal in this effort?
As I reviewed, I kept going over it and over and over it. My question is, in the emergency amount for review only of 30K or below.
Could you say what page this is on the draft?
It's on page 2 of the draft. I have a question about the emergency amount, and do we need to provide a definition in a paragraph form of what the emergency is? Or is that just subjective?
No, it's actually, if you recall, we talked about this in our committee meeting at the back of section 17 at the very back. There's page 12 of 13. There's emergency procurement. And then there's also page 13 of 13. There's emergency conditions. So we can we can bulk those up if they're not substantial enough, but we want to get to a place where the Finance Committee is all in agreement and can make strong recommendations about adopting this policy. So if the Finance Committee itself still has questions, then we should have a Finance Committee meeting, because in effect, you're questioning yourself, right?
Yes, I am questioning myself.
So let's have a Finance Committee meeting and get it to that place.
Okay, I would like for that to be clearer.
Are there council member, other than that, do you have anything you'd like to add, since this is your policy?
No.
Okay, Councilmember Unger.
Lorraine, are you satisfied with the checks and balances that are in this section here to make sure that nothing can slip by, nobody can squeeze a credit card charge? Are things looked after and double checked, and how would that work out?
I'm not, I haven't finished going through the bid requirements and that part yet, but as far as credit cards, I thought it was well stated. There's also checks and balances that we implement as your accountants in who has access to what features in your accounting system to be able to cut checks or change vendors' names or addresses and that type of thing. But yes, I don't have any qualms about the purchasing policy aspect of checks and balances from what I saw so far.
And to speak to that, the checks and balances are going to be more focused on your internal financial controls that we're implementing versus a purchasing policy.
Other council member questions, comments, thoughts? Do you have recommendation? Are members of the council generally feeling like we're going in the right direction with this? Is finance committee going in the right direction here? Lorraine?
Madam Mayor, I thought I should add something to my response to Councilmember Unger. When it comes to the credit cards, I did recommend a change, which has just been sent out, so it hasn't been digested yet, to not endorse the common use of credit cards, but to use them only in limited occasions and to keep that from happening. Because as soon as a credit card is used, the purchase is made, as opposed to our normal system where a purchase is made and invoice is sent. There's an approval and a process before a check is cut to be sent to pay for it.
I want to actually emphasize that because I think that's a really good example of what happens when you have somebody in charge of making those administrative decisions that maybe isn't super experienced with administrative work, where we had an administrator who felt like it was a policy win, or not a policy win, but it was a efficiency, there's an element of efficiency to that, to having credit cards and using them routinely, that at the time, like, you could understand his argument. It's efficient. It makes it just easier on his end. But from a municipal financial accounting perspective, it clogs up the whole end of producing these financial reports. And so having somebody in that role who's an experienced clerk and who has experience with municipal finance, that's the kind of thing that can really turn into a problem if we don't have that.
Just one last thing, and maybe nobody else is wondering this. I know who this lady in pink is, but I'm guessing that some people do not. And perhaps if you were going to introduce her at some point, I'm sorry to jump the gun.
Yeah, that's okay. This is our new interim clerk, Charity Campfield, and she'll be sworn in as our treasurer as well soon. So it's at tonight's meeting. So thank you for that, Nancy. Any other council members who have thoughts on the draft purchasing policy before Finance Committee has another meeting and we move it forward, and then we'll bring it back to you guys for adoption? Mayor Pro Tem.
I was just curious if our town attorney could speak to how this compares to other towns and if there's things that you noticed that might warrant inclusion.
I haven't reviewed the current draft yet. I'll review the final draft before it goes in the council packet. So I can give you a better answer at that point, but I worked with the mayor initially to give her a list of like 5 or so of my clients, just different purchasing policies. And so they really run the gamut. Some are like literally 2 pages and some are 100 pages or more. And so I think she chose sort of a hybrid approach.
Yep.
Yeah, but I will review it before it goes in the final packet.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your help tonight, Lorraine. We really appreciate you coming tonight in person and guiding us through all of this.
You're welcome. Glad to be here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We are going to move on to the next section of our workshop, which is the administrative report on town facilities. In your packet, you have a document which Coordinator Nugent created to help capture all of the information about our town properties, right? Like, what properties does the town own and when did we buy them? And for what was the purpose? What was the thinking on them when we did that? He's going to present a PowerPoint presentation that will help walk us through that in a more comprehensive way. When he speaks to some of these documents that are referenced in the presentation, know that these documents, we're just showing you a glimpse of them on the screen, but know that, like, if you want to see the full document and dive into the details, we have them and we can provide them. And we're sharing that with the people participating remotely. And Coordinator Nugent, thank you for your work here, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. what we are trying to do here is to give you had asked for some background as to what the properties were that we owned, why we own them, various questions along those lines. So what I wanted to do was to put something together where I could discuss that and give you an opportunity to look at it. If you have questions during the course of the presentation, please feel free to signal to the mayor and let her know that you have a question. You don't need to hold it toward the end.
Yes, thank you for reminding them. That's for council. If you guys want to, this is also, as he's presenting, this is also time for you to weigh in. And ask your question.
Basically, the questions that we were looking at is what property do we now own as the town? And how do these properties reflect in our long-term vision? And how can we leverage them for financial sustainability and community benefit? The basic things that we have at this point is, of course, Town Hall, which is at 4176 Benton. We have what we are now calling the Town Hall Annex, which is the building at 4185 Ames, as the building at 4183 has been torn down. This property was purchased in 8/23/2025. The housing partnership was the next property we bought, 4193 Ames. And this one was purchased in 8/7/2024. And the most recent purchase that we made was something that we made for a commercial opportunity. It's at 4375 Benton, and it was purchased in July of this year. These four properties were all serve a different purpose in what we're doing right now. And we'll try to give you a little bit of an idea of what that is. We're going to start with of course, Town Hall, 4176 Benton Street. Prior to 2020, the property looked like this. You'll notice basically that it's in the center of the Town Hall Park area. Go ahead to the next one. During Mayor Levy's administration, we purchased the little cutout portion that you'll see there. That was as we were getting ready to try and expand that building and make that into something more.
When you hear us talk about something called a notch, we're referring to that because we notched out an additional little piece.
This just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of the area that we're talking about. It's that little L-shaped notch there on the side of Town Hall.
And previously it was owned by Open Space, as is all the other land around it. And now we own that piece where the little free library is.
If you look at this particular slide, what we're looking at here is you can see that now Town Hall encompasses that notch piece. And then on either side is Open Space and owned by Open Space. So that's that area in yellow there. One of the things that we were looking to do is we were trying to come up with a way that we could use that notch to build a two-story addition. RG and Associates, who are town engineers, worked with Mayor Libby and they came up with a plan for that. If you go to the next slide, we've got a couple of options that are here. We're just going to kind of go past those, but just be aware that there were a couple of options that we were talking about. The main thing was they were going to build a two-story addition in that little section of what we're now calling the notch. Go ahead and move forward. And then you have an artist rendering of what it was supposed to look like. Basically, what we were working on at that time was they were trying to find ways to improve and add things to Town Hall that we currently don't have. They wanted to have a slightly larger area for the waiting area for court and or council meetings. They needed to upgrade bathrooms. They wanted more office space for the staff. We wanted to look at trying to get more ADA compliance into the building because there are some issues that we have, which we will probably be coming up with here shortly because of the ADA transition plan that we're currently in the process of doing. The other big thing that we wanted was storage areas, which we are very short on. And then they were just throwing it out that there would be other possibilities with using that space.
I think partly why I put possibly other things as well, just to be completely frank, is that because that was a prior administrative effort or administration's effort, I wasn't entirely clear on what the problems were that he was trying to address with RG and Associates plans. it wasn't well documented. So when I looked at those drawings, I could see that there were some things that they were trying to do, but I couldn't clearly understand like what the problems were that they were trying to solve, other than a few things that we listed there.
And so basically, as she's saying, when Mayor Mitchum took over, the thing that we were looking at that point was that we were trying to understand what they thought we needed to have for the town in order to have more, better use of our town hall facility. And we were looking at whether prior administration's solutions would actually work for it. As we went forward, they were trying to decide on that, whether that was going to suffice. We actually went in February of 2022 and had a architectural firm put together a plan for this. The next couple of drawings are going to be part of that plan. You'll see that there's a picture of the current town hall as it sits right now. They basically gave us a lot of information. One of the things that you need to be aware of, though, is that as we are looking at the facility, some of the things that we were talking about needing, the storage, is like a critical thing because there are various storage needs that are needed. We need storage for the town clerk. We need storage for the court clerk. We need storage for evidence for the PD, and we need storage for PD and, of course, for Public Works. Of those right now, the only one that really has a lot of storage on site is Public Works in that garage. The rest of them don't have any storage. And the problem being that we can't just have a large single storage area. All of this has to be stored in separate locked rooms with proper security. So that's one of the big things. The other thing that we came up with issues that are there is that the police needed more office space. They need a holding cell so that we can have a place to put somebody for even a short while until they can get them to.
The members of the public to be quiet, please. Thank you.
They needed a holding cell so they have a place to put people for a short period until they can get them to jail. We do have a locker room and a changing area, but we don't have any showers for PD, which would be something that would be really nice for them to have. Basically, the problem that we ran into through all of this when Coke looked at this and started putting together their things is that there are limitations because of the open space land use rules, and we can't use any of that space on either side of Town Hall, to the extent that if you look at Town Hall and you say, well, why don't we just pop the top and go up? The problem is that we did some work and found out that the foundations were not sufficient to go to a second story. The only building there that has that potential even would be the garage, but we technically don't own the garage ourselves. That is an open space facility. So we don't really have a place that we can go up. If we try to go up, you have to put additional supports into the walls. And in doing that, since we can't even go out a couple of inches into the open space on either side, all of that extra, it would have to come inside, which then reduces the amount of space that you have inside. So that's kind of the problem that we ran into. They have, again, a bunch of options here. We can just.
Can I talk to one other thing there? It jogs my memory. When we were investigating what are the true programmatic needs of the town with Koch Architects' help as they were interviewing staff, one of the really key examples that they gave that hit home for me is the police department entrance. So when the police department was interviewed, they spoke to like what it's like for them when they had an experience where they had a female in custody. And what they do with a female in custody is they have to go down a dark alley with police officers, and they get walked through what looks like a garage area into a back door. And it doesn't say town hall. It doesn't say, like, it just is not what we want our police department to be doing as we're improving our reputation and our services and supporting them and trying to provide really good services to the community. So I thought that was a really good example of a way in which the improvement was just so, easy to visualize how we could make some improvements. Thank you.
The basically what it came to is, in the end, after looking at all of the options that they had, and there are options there. If you would like to see them again, please ask for this particular paper, and we'll be glad to share with you. For the brevity, we didn't really want to spend a lot of time going through each of their options. What it came down to in the end was that with the site limitations that we have because of the setbacks and the open space use, we really couldn't use this property at 4176 and either go up or go out. There's just not a way to utilize that facility in that way. So that was basically the conclusion of the Coke thing. The next thing I had was I was just running through a couple of things, realizing that we couldn't actually change the property overall. We did do some things to try and enhance what we are using. Through May through August of 2022, we did some interior renovations. That was when we added some office space. We added the bathrooms and some break room space. Still left us where we don't have the storage facilities. We don't have the shower facilities for PD. We don't really have, by taking the extra office space and putting it in there, we actually reduced the amount of space that was available for town council meetings and also for court. Court is another big one that we haven't really talked about too much, but in the Coke thing, they talked with the court people, and basically there was a need for a judge's chambers, which we do not have right now. They needed an office for the prosecuting attorney to use, and we don't really have that. They just have to sit out at a desk and do that.
We actually almost lost that contract because of that.
Yeah, it is a big problem. Court is one of those things that we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about, but we really do need to come up with a way to more efficiently handle court. At this point, when court is in session, basically everybody else has to kind of stay out of town hall. You can't get in there because it's just so crowded and there's so much going on. Next thing that we added is in August of 23, we added the police carports. That was to protect the vehicles so that in the case of hailstorms, we wouldn't suffer a major loss like we had a few years earlier. In December of 2023, we moved the main electrical panel from inside to outside. This was because it was in a place where it was not accessible, and it was causing us to have some issues with our insurance company, Sursa. And so we moved it to where it is not blocked anymore and is easily accessible. Through 2023 and 2024, we were working on security upgrades, which we finally finished in February of 2024. In August of 2023, we became aware of the fact that there was an adjacent property that could help us provide eventual options to our long-term solution. This property, of course, is at 4183 and 4185 Ames Street. At the time that we were looking at this, it was, as everyone will remember, an eyesore. It was in the process of being worked on and had been worked on for years. There was a problem with the foundation, which caused them to stop working on it for quite a while, and it ended up being sold. When we found out that it had just been sold, it just so happened that we were able to get in, talk to the new owner, and convince him to sell it to us. The reason
he didn't make a profit at all. He sold it
No.
to us for what he bought it.
Yeah, he basically sold it. It was just a turnover because he thought that we had a vision for what we could use it for. It was a nuisance, and initially we were just thinking we wanted to tear it down. There was some talk of potentially using it as a property to swap with open space so that we could get that property that is now the town park and use that to expand into. And then they could have this property over at 4185. That didn't happen, and we'll get into that in a minute. because we actually ended up having a discussion with open space at one point and found out that that was not something we were going to be able to do. They were not at all interested in swapping out the properties. And so it was a useless project at that point.
What I recall during these days is that we were having public meetings about this and reporting on it regularly. Do council members who were present at the table remember that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't remember why they were very reticent to do a swap though. I just remember
Oh, I
they were
do.
not gonna be buying that.
I can summarize quickly. They have a voter mandate to pursue open space. They do not care about municipal services and town halls. They care about open space. So they are not going to guarantee a swap until we provide the park. We would have had to completely develop the new park, and then they might have a conversation with us if the new park was better than the old park, but they wouldn't guarantee it. And they said, please, don't count on it. So it was they were very, very frank with us. And I remember being appreciative that they didn't, lead us around.
Do you think there's been any movement? I mean, there's always turnover at agencies and whatnot. I wonder if it's worth like a follow-on conversation, although
They were really, really, really clear. They were very clear that they had felt like they had they had accommodated Mountain View beyond what they thought was reasonable by selling us the notch. That had been a huge move for them, and they had worked extensively with Mayor Levy to do that, and it was a massive move for them. That was a hard thing. And they encouraged us to look at other options. They said that their goal is to provide open space, period. And they have a voter mandate to do that.
So this slide is just showing what the new property footprint looks like, showing Town Hall in the front and 4185, 4183 to the back. I have a timeline here. We purchased the property in August of 23. As you may recall, those of you who were on town council at that time, the resolution in September of 23 was made to demolish both 4183 and 4185 and get rid of those.
183 was the smaller property, was like the little garage in the back, that
The
structure.
carriage house in the back, yes.
And then 4185 is the house that
The
exists.
large house in the front. In order to do that, we started moving forward in October. As you see, we did an asbestos inspection of both properties. It was in November that we actually had the meeting with Open Space. And that was when we found out that we were not going to be able to swap the property with them. Up till that time, our thought had been that we would demolish the properties and then we would move forward with the swap with Open Space if that was something they were amenable to. As we move forward, then knowing that we were not going to be able to do that, we went ahead and did a asbestos remediation of both property or both structures in November. It was only actually a year later, basically in October of 24, that we came to a realization that there was not a real good need to tear down both of the properties, that the one at 4185 might be usable as a storage facility in the basement and then a town meeting hall on the upstairs. And so it was at that point that we started to look at that as a possibility. We went to council and got direction from them in that same month to look at the renovation of 4185. We went ahead in November of 24 and took out the smaller property in the back, the carriage house at 4183. And we were looking at trying to move forward with the bigger property. At that point, one of the things that I was concerned about was that before we ever looked at buying this property, we were aware that there was a problem with the foundation and that it didn't pass a safe built inspection for a permit. So I was working in that interim time between trying to figure out, is this property usable? Was the foundation usable? Was there a way that we could get this so that it would pass an inspection and be something we could use? So I've been working on that since basically October of 24. The council at the budgeting in November of 24 directed that we needed to cut back our efforts on that property and that we needed to limit ourselves to only $10,000. As you may recall at that time, what I had proposed was that with that $10,000, we might be able to figure out the foundation issues and make sure that this property would be something we could utilize. That was what we've been working on ever since, and we haven't really gone very far because we only had the $10,000 and that was not a lot to work with. More recently, after the council asked and said, why isn't anything happening with this? We went ahead and did a concept presentation of what we thought might be useful on that property. And that was when we gave you those 3 different options that we were looking at a month or so ago. And so that is kind of where we are on that. Now we're moving on to the next one. In the 4193 Ames Street, the one on the corner, what you may not remember, or maybe you do, is that in August of 24, we were looking at the idea of opting into Proposition 123, which is basically a statewide regional thing to improve affordable and attainable housing availability. And it provides incentives to local governments who do earmark or set aside properties. So we were looking at this not as a place that we could just buy and make a ton of money on. What we were looking at was to come up with a property that would be a low income housing property. We purchased this property and it was in that month in August of 24. And basically what we were trying to do is follow up with the not only the Proposition 123, but also the comp plan, as you see a quote
That's
from.
actually from the resolution to opt into Prop 123.
So what we're looking to do is to try and come up with a way that we could have a low income housing property. So that was kind of the thought in looking at that. As you can see, it is right next to the 4185 Ames property. So that gives us another thought that we could use at some point.
And the property owners came to us when they realized that we purchased the property right beside them. They approached the town. We didn't approach them.
So the property was looked at and we purchased it with a couple of goals in mind. The first and most immediate goal was that we could use it to provide low income housing to try and help us to get into that Proposition 123. The other thing that we were looking at is by having 2 properties right next to each other, that was going to make it so that down the road, if we looked at it, we might be able to utilize both of those properties to come up with something that would be larger and be a town hall complex using both.
What I remember about that negotiation as well was that we agreed to have an independent appraiser do the appraisal for the value of that property. And both parties agreed to just pay that amount. So there wasn't like a negotiation where we were like, it's worth this much and it's worth that much. We just had an independent appraisal and it was done.
And the other thing is it never actually hit the market,
Right.
to the open market. They approached us and said, hey, we know you bought this property next door. Would you be interested in ours? At the time, we thought that that would be a way that we could save some money and get that property. And then, like I said, for the short term, low income housing down the road, if council decides, we might be able to use both properties and build something bigger.
Frankly, one of the ideas in the back of my mind was using that house as administrative offices. Like I thought it was kind of a cute idea to have administrative offices for a small town in a little Victorian house. I think Morrison does that. So I liked the way that it opened up our options, and all of that was also done in an open meeting.
And we did do a lot of, just so to cover that one, we did talk a lot about how we could use it if we decided we wanted to use it. We were looking at using the garage as a storage area that we could divvy up into three different storerooms so that each of our storage needs could be met by using that property. But it just seemed like there was way too much expense involved, and council seemed to be more interested in the low income housing options. So that was kind of where we ended up going to. The other thing that you need to keep in mind is that this reflected our comp plan. The goal was to support attainable housing and join regional partners in the effort to provide and improve affordable housing. And that was kind of where we were going with this. So that property was bought primarily with that use, and that was what it's been used for. Timeline on this is that we had the open meeting back in July of 24 to discuss the purchase. Purchase was made in August of 24, and we signed the intergovernmental agreement with Foothills Housing in April. And as far as I know, they're in the process of getting it rented at this point. I've talked to somebody just the other day who was over there prepping some of the stuff, and don't know exactly when they'll get it rented, but it should be any day now.
And if council recalls that on some level, although it's not a huge revenue source, it is another way to diversify our revenue income by having rental property. Councilmember Debner, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to, make it known to council and the public that you can actually go on their website and see the houses that they have available. So we could just stay tuned and monitor that, because I imagine it'll pop up soon.
Yeah, he told me the other day when I talked to the guy that he thought it was going to be any day now. So the last property that we need to talk about is 4375 Benton Street. And again, this one we were looking at as a potential for commercial development and a long-term revenue diversification. This property was purchased with the immediate goal of we wanted to get it off the market. It's a very interesting property, and as it is currently a R2 zone, somebody could have bought this and put a really huge house on this property.
Because it's about twice the size of a normal Mountain View lot.
So the initial thought was we get it off the market, we get it to where nobody can go in there and put a large house on it.
Primarily because, I'm sorry to interrupt, primarily because at that time we were hearing from residents that they didn't want any more large houses, and we were having a big, important conversation about that. And so we really didn't want that to happen. We knew it was that the property owner was looking to sell it. And he came to us, he was sympathetic to the town's goals. And he came to us again, this property owner approached us and started that negotiation.
And again, the long-term goal is that we were looking at it, and as council had discussed during their meeting when they were discussing this property, the possibility was to rezone it. In order to get a rezoning, somebody has to actually request that. If somebody had come in and bought it as a residential property, they're probably not going to come and ask to have it rezoned. They're just going to go ahead and throw a big house on there, and it probably could have gotten 2 big houses on there for as big as that property is. So the long-term goal is to rezone it, make it commercial or mixed use, and then hopefully we can attract someone, a developer, to come in and put something on there that will add to our revenue stream for sales tax and or other taxes that are coming through. Just a reminder, back in November of 24, the council had a presentation from the Downtown Colorado Inc. DTC. And what this was all about was the commercial revitalization of town. They were looking at primarily the stretch along 44th, as well as that small stretch along Sheridan there. This property is in a unique position because it is actually just off of 44th Avenue. And so it is right next to and abuts all of the other commercial properties, which makes it a very interesting place to have it. This presentation was in November of 24. There was an open meeting to discuss the purchase a couple of months ago, and then we just closed on the property in July. So now that is ours. If you look at this picture, you'll see how close it is to 44th Avenue and to the commercial zoned areas. You'll see it is just right off of it, which makes it a perfect place to rezone it into commercial also. If you look at this picture, you'll see that it is basically double the size of most lots in Mountain View, which again was part of why we were concerned that if it had gone residential, you could have ended up with two huge houses on that property. All of these things that we've done align with the council's goals and with the comp plan. Everything that we're trying to do is to meet these things that council has said they value and that they think are important. And the comp plan, which is telling us what not only council, but what the community has said they thought was important and needed to be done. By buying these properties, we are helping to support staff and town services. We're trying to come up with a way to give more space to the staff. Quite frankly, at this point, I don't even have an office. I work half the time out of my truck because I've got no place to sit and work some of the time, especially when there's things going on in town hall.
You don't only don't have an office, you don't have a desk.
Yeah. This all works to enhance our infrastructure. If we can provide stuff that helps with safety and the distinctiveness of our town, this is all for our benefit. The town staff really could use some additional stuff. Just the storage alone is such a huge problem. Right now, we're renting storage units across the street, and it just isn't very convenient and it doesn't work very well. The other thing that we're trying to do is by doing some of these things, we're trying to help with the financial aspect of the town. 4385 is going to be hopefully something that will long-term give us some tax revenues. Because it's a larger property, there are a lot of things that could go in there. It's just a question of having council look at it and say, this is what we think we need to rezone it as, this is what we're working toward. And it all comes down to you. The other thing that we're looking at is if we can get a larger town hall annex or a larger town hall, that's going to help with the community as far as moving forward, having places to do town functions, regardless of what the weather is doing. It'll give us more space for some of that stuff, which will be of value to the community. We'll have a place for court. We'll have a place for town council meetings. All of this is important. And it all works on what the comp plan has told us you all wanted to look at. So the key takeaways is that each of these properties was purchased with a reason. It was a clear strategic purpose. Every decision was made transparently in open meetings. It's not like any of this stuff was done in a backdoor deal. These properties are all long-term investments. People need to understand that just because we took money out of an account and bought a property with it, it doesn't mean that that money just went away. That property is still worth something. And down the road, we can sell it if we need to, or do whatever we need to do with it. But that money is still there. It hasn't disappeared from us.
I think on that point, it's important to note that the town's overall financial standing didn't change. It's just those funds went from your cash in hand line item now to your capital outlay. Right? So your overall financial situation still has that dollar value. It just got moved to a different line item in your capital
Thank you.
investments.
Yeah.
Over the next 5 to 7 years, you can go to the next one. What we're looking for is we've been trying to build a foundation for future growth and for service improvements. That is what the whole purchase of all of these properties has been looking at. We've studied all of these challenges, and what we're trying to do is to find a way to move forward. And what we're asking council at this point is to shift from trying to look at what all the problems are, and let's try to move toward looking at what solutions you want to do and where you want to move with these properties going forward. The choices that we make today will shape Mountain View's ability to serve the residents, sustain revenues, and help us to remain a vibrant, thriving community. So the key questions for council at the end of this is, do we want to move forward with the 4185 and try and work that as a town hall annex? Do we want to engage with DCI on looking at opportunities for the commercial property that we think could go in at 4385 and working on our overall commercial zone and trying to enhance that? And basically, we're calling for a move from studying all of these issues to an action and trying to come up with something that will long-term sustain and help the town. So that's basically where we're at. What steps are we ready to direct the staff and mayor to take to move this forward?
Thank you, Coordinator Nugent. That was a really helpful presentation and well presented to us all. Council. Councilmember Deb.
I just want to echo the mayor's compliment. It was a wonderful presentation. Having this comprehensive packet put together for the public and for council is of great value. So thank you.
Does it help you get to a place where you're ready to move forward on the annex?
Yeah, I think just based on the discussions we had on Saturday, kind of my first question that comes to my mind is, what sort of grant opportunities are available that would maybe help guide our decision making? I think that may be an unanswered question today, but I certainly think that might be something that, I think council might have interest in looking into.
Do you want to speak to that?
So based off of the recommendation I received from council on Saturday, I have already reached out to our local DOLA rep. I'm working on setting a meeting to go over some of these grant fundings. So I'm not prepared to have that answer for you, but I think it will help kind of give council options of what plans that we could move forward with. And depending on the grant funding sources, there may be multiple options. So we'll have to bring that back in a work session.
Mm-hmm. What about the DCI concept? I just want to speak with him just a little bit more, Councilmember Debner, before we move to the next person. The Downtown Colorado Inc. and the commercial properties, are we ready to move that forward? Because I would picture the annex and the grant, the development of the town hall annex would likely be in our town clerk's capable hands to start looking at grants and coming back to council with information. And it would likely be in the mayor's role to start engaging with Downtown Colorado Inc. to think about what's possible in that property to zone. What's the ideal kind of revenue generating source to put in that property, to zone that property for?
Yeah, and I think that, from my perspective, that seems like the highest risk and something that we should probably move towards, quickly. Just so we can have a stable revenue and diversify that for long-term vision of our town. It just seems really critical to me to explore those commercial options for sales tax generation.
Thank you. Councilmember Lasher.
I've spoke about this multiple times. I think that it's a bigger picture, and I think that we need to get downtown Colorado to look at redoing 44th, redoing Sheridan, redoing that building, or, that to see what we should put in there that's going to set us up for the best future. So I think everything goes hand in hand. I think with talking to DOLA, I think that we should be mentioning our big, the council's goals that we've set and have been working towards for 4 years. I think we're getting closer every day, and I get that it's frustrating, but this has been a big picture. It's not just out on a whim that we did these things. And so I think that working with DOLA on everything is it's a big picture, and I think it can all work together really well.
I think if that's the direction council wants to go, the first step we need to do is to get that property rezoned from the planning perspective. So that way we can have the availability to have those conversations and it's already ready to go.
Mayor Pro Tem.
But would it make sense to see that it would support adequate commercial development before you go ahead and rezone it?
That's part of the rezoning process. The planners will weigh in on that.
Yeah.
Back up a little bit.
We would have the planners weigh in on that in the rezoning process.
What I've noticed when working with DOLA and various other development situations, we have a number of developers who are very interested in our properties. And they're coming to us. They're ready. They're ready to start talking with us. And so I've directed them to DOLA, and we've said, speak with our DOLA rep and find out what's possible so that you can put together the best package possible. And what DOLA's response was when the developers came to the table with nothing at all and just, you tell me what I should put here. DOLA was like, that's too broad. Usually you go to DOLA with a well-articulated idea of what you want before you ask for funding. So the what's possible, it's the cart before the horse, basically. Councilmember Unger?
This is a trivial little thing, but I'm so gosh darn literal. I really encourage anybody that wants to come to me and give me some ideas for these properties, especially the one here and there. I refer to them as the White House, the Blue House, and the Benton House. Because when Dave talks out about the addresses, I go, okay, which one's that? Which one's that? So now I refer to them as the Blue Rental, the White House, which is over in the same property, and the Benton House. And I would welcome your comments and feel free to direct them to me in color coded.
It'd be pretty funny if we called our town hall annex the White House.
I expect we could paint it.
Councilmember Dennis?
Yeah, and again, I feel like I've touched on this many times. As we see our revenues fall in the recreational marijuana, we need to diversify our revenue streams. And I really feel like we need to move quickly on rezoning that Benton property and getting someone in to help us with that. Because we've seen this downtrend for the last several years as we've been following this, and we can't rely on this forever. And there's only so much we can do currently on our commercial corridors. We can't really do anything else. This is pretty much what we have right now. So this is setting us up for long-term solutions and also kind of tackling that problem where people were upset about large homes. So this is kind of, killing two birds with one stone. I feel like if we move forward with this quickly, we can see results.
Speaking of killing two birds with one stone, you've heard our town attorney speak about our zoning code and how patchwork it's been developed, how it's a Franken code. And if we're going to be talking about rezoning, what our town attorney and I are really hoping we can do is we also improve that entire code at the same time.
Yeah.
Councilmember Alguin hasn't spoken yet. I just want to make sure, and then before we go to a second statement from a council.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I guess I have a question in this, so I my priority is with other council members. I want to see diversification in our revenue generation. So that's my priority. But my question is, I guess, when in the process do we bring in the community for, I mean, they're always obviously invited for comment and at meetings, but do we have a particular session that is specific to this property? And when does we fit the community in our plans? Because I think we need to have buy-in from the community.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful if council sort of created their own work plan. I think you've mentioned 4 or 5 action items related to this property just in this session. And so I think we need to start understanding what comes first and directing staff to work on those based off council's direction. And so in my view, one of those is look at your zoning code. If you don't want auto-oriented uses, you got to change your zoning code because that's what it allows right now. It doesn't allow mixed uses. So if you want to move to a more modern development for your commercial corridor, to me, that's a really good first step. And of course, that would happen in a public meeting where we'd go through your zoning and council would get to decide what uses stay and which uses go. And what uses you need in addition to what you don't have. After you do that process, or maybe concurrently, you could also bring the rezoning to that new district. Once you bring the rezoning to the property, that's when you probably want to get in touch with DOLA. And DOLA can help guide you through that process and give you options of how you select a developer to get that property off the ground or if you just want to sell the property for, what you bought it plus some, because it's going to be a whole lot more marketable once you give it modern uses. And you hold all those cards. Those first two decisions, 100% council decision, 100% at your discretion.
I appreciate you kind of giving me the step-by-step of what that looks like, because it's a very complicated process.
That's why we need the professionals at the table. Thank you. Councilmember Debner.
Do we think it would be beneficial to ask the community first what sort of uses, and that would help guide the zoning decisions? Yeah.
So I think it's a part of the same conversation. I think if we can walk through it as a group with the public to say, hey, here's some of the issues. Let's go through what you allow today and why that doesn't allow, or how that doesn't align with council's current policies. If you don't want more tire and oil change shops, then you got to change your zoning code. If you want to see modern mixed uses, you got to change your zoning code. So how we go about those changes, you have a ton of options, and we can walk through those options as a part of a public meeting with council and the public and get that input.
Councilmember Lasher.
There's also like, sorry, professionals who do this as a job, like as their full-time career, where they come in and they tell us what is actually going to thrive here and what's going to go under. So it's like, if everyone's like, we want a coffee shop, and the professionals are telling us a coffee shop's not going to last, I think we should be finding out what is going to be the most successful and then bring community input in, because everyone can say, I want a coffee shop, but if no one wants to pay $9 for a latte, it's going to go under.
That actually just jogged my memory. I'm so glad you said that. The DOLA rep, Todd Leopold, said that we could apply for a planning grant that we would, he even gave me the template for how to apply, which would answer those questions.
Yep. And so, I mean, it is a large chunk of change to redo your zoning, because you have to bring in either your contracted planner or do an RFP with another firm to get that project completed. I think after the whole planning piece is put together, then once you know the use, we could do a deep dive into what kind of commercial facilities bring in the most sales tax revenue and things like that, and if it's allowed with the new use. So they all fall in line piece by piece, but the starting point is your zoning code and to get it rezoned. And I think some of these conversations might be a little premature until we can get direction on if that's where you want us to go or not.
So can I kind of see a general thumbs up that we want to see a work plan from staff in terms of beginning this work to modernize our code, our zoning, commercial code, and start to put together a work plan?
Absolutely. Yes. And quickly.
Yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy. I've showed the mayor this probably like when I first started with the town.
Yeah.
I walked with you, shared my screen of saying like, give me any question on what you can and can't do with your property, time me and how long it takes. Find the answer. I'll go show you a different code, time me how long it takes. And so I'm happy to go through that exercise with council and the community, so you can start to understand some of the issues and how other communities address it, just structurally.
Great. I think that'd be a great workshop. Yeah.
And how much time should we put on the agenda for that at the next meeting?
I think if we just want to stick with high level issues and high level solutions, so not get down to the weeds of what uses are we going to allow, but structurally, what are we looking for in our new code? I think we can knock that out in a half hour. I think when we walk through your use table, which when I do these projects, we go through every single use. And we say, yes, in this district, no, in this district, and you go through every single use of that process. That takes quite a long time. So that will be, step 2 of the process, but we'll want to budget like probably sit out for that.
Okay. Okay. We'll put together a plan. Do you feel like we have enough
Yeah, that was really
direction? Yeah. And in terms of the town hall annex, AKA the White House, can we think about what next steps are, generally speaking, on that? Are we ready to look at moving forward a little on concepts, or do we want to just put a pin in that?
I think the direction from Saturday's retreat was to look at grant funding sources and implement that into a 3 to 5 year capital improvement plan. And so that's more of a long-term conversation.
That makes sense. I was seeing head nods from,
Would the commercial property also be a part of the capital improvement plan, or are those typically not address commercial development for sales tax
If
revenue?
we're not putting the money up to develop the commercial property, then it's not part of the capital improvement plan, right? So the capital improvement plan is specifically for town-owned, town-used capital projects.
So I think you'll answer that question with the commercial district in some time. But we're not there yet. Whether you want to be the owner at the end of the day, receive revenues from a lease, but also administer a lease, or you just want to sell it to someone to do that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
And it's fairly common, correct me if I'm wrong, that the town can take a piece of property, develop it, and then sell it. So that was like the case in Edgewater with the Edgewater beer garden, and also the
Or
Edgewater
zone it and then sell it. Yeah.
zone it and sell it. But that was the case with the Edgewater beer garden as well as the Edgewater public marketplace, if I'm not mistaken. They
Yeah.
started both of those projects and they are thriving, but they're no longer, they're getting the revenue from those projects, but they're not having to deal with the leasing.
Yeah, there really is quite a lot of ways to go about it. If you have a really specific design in mind, we absolutely want it to look this way. We absolutely want it to house this type of retail and this type of housing. Then you probably want to keep the property and get a preferred developer that you're going to give, a 10% cut, probably at least, on the back end when you sell the property. And they're going to develop the property for you. That's one option if you have a really specific idea in mind. If you just want to generate sales tax, then you're probably better off rezoning the property with a onslaught of new uses that are more marketable and selling it. So we can definitely cross that bridge when we get there.
I just think it should be part of the conversation just because it has been proven to be successful in nearby areas. So it's something to consider.
Yes.
Councilmember Lasher.
I'm really for the capital improvement plan, but not 3 to 5 years. I'm more of like the 1 to 3 year time frame, which I know. So we should speed that up.
Okay. Do we have enough direction from council?
Yeah.
Let's move on to the last item on our workshop, and then we'll take a break and do our regular meeting. But the last item on our workshop is the mayor pay workshop. So this is our second workshop on this topic, and the question is about where is the council going to land on compensating the mayor for the next term? So the incoming mayor compensation is what we're talking about here. And there's a lot of information in your packet for purposes of the discussion. I just want to I won't go through all of the information in your packet. I'm hoping that everybody on council has thoroughly read that information. But from a high level place, I'm trying to tie in the information about what's the difference between a council manager form of government and a council mayor form of government, AKA a strong mayor, and trying to help council consider that when you're talking about compensation, you should compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges and not apples to oranges. So that's one of the points that I was trying to help council focus on in the information that's in your packet. In addition, I included a list of programs that the town currently runs to help people understand how has it, because I think what we've heard in our prior workshop was, how is it possible that the town programs are so much more demanding that a professional full-time mayor is needed versus a part-time mayor of 10 years ago, that kind of thing. Why in the last 5 to 7 years have we grown when we haven't grown in population? And so that list of programs that are in your packet that the town currently runs, that's what that's about. And about half of them were run 10 years ago. All of them are currently run. And then we also included in your packet a list of charter and code sections related to specifics of the mayor and town administrator, if there is a town administrator, what those responsibilities are. So from there, I will just let the council sort of lead that discussion, and we'll go from there. Who would like to speak first? Mayor Pro Tem?
I just had one quick question. I know we talked about this sort of briefly, with our town attorney about the potential for like sort of future proofing. If there were to make if the council were to approve a mayoral pay increase, but then the elected mayor chose to hire a town administrator. But is there a way to future proof it if, say, there's a governance change and there's a town manager hired? Is it easy to just do town administrator / town manager to help future proof it if there, because I don't want to get ourselves in a situation where, you approve this mayoral pay increase and then you change governance systems and then you're paying a town manager, but also paying the mayor at that higher rate of pay.
Yes, so you can absolutely do that. And I think that's a great idea to sort of future proof this. And I think really what Councilmember Bailey is getting at is that, as a reminder to council, per the emoluments clause in the Constitution, and our charter also restates this, current elected officials can't change their own salary. So you're not going to be able to change this again until the next election for each individual position to which you're adjusting. So if the mayor, you want to get another crack at the apple, that would be effective until 4 years from this November. So thinking about all of those future scenarios that might come into play, and that 4-year gap is really prudent. And I think that's a great addition to that. We can add that to the resolution, no problem.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Unger?
For the audience that's here and me as well, since we had John as the administrator, would you please explain in very clear understanding the difference between an administrator and a manager and how it would work in this town?
Okay, so the administrator title is typically used in the scenario where you have a strong mayor. That's not always the case, but typically. And they are administering the authority of the mayor. So they are working underneath the mayor. They're sometimes called the assistant to the mayor. That's what they used to be called. A manager fulfills the roles of the department. They are the head of all department heads in the town. So you can copy place town manager with strong mayor. They fulfill the same obligations.
One is elected and one is not, right?
Correct. Yep, exactly right. So that's really the key distinction between a strong mayor system is that a strong mayor system, you're electing that highest department head. You're electing them, the people are.
Okay.
In a manager system, they're being hired by the council.
Gotcha.
Who are elected.
Correct. So it's just a little direct versus indirect democracy for. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
I've gotten that question from people so many times.
It's
And just when I think I understand it, they throw me a curve and I think, well, maybe I don't understand as well as I thought I did.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Councilmember Debner?
I just want to make sure I understand what you had mentioned earlier. So the pay rate that would be set, that's essentially locked in for an entire 4-year term and it can't be changed by resolution
For the mayor, correct.
for the mayor.
So it's for each elected, so same for the council members, but you guys are rotating.
Every 2 years.
I have 2-year terms. Okay. So for,
No, 4-year terms.
oh, 4-year terms.
3 year up for election every 2 years.
Okay, so it would also be that 4-year period.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lasher?
So you said that they couldn't change their rate. So earlier we heard someone who's running for mayor say that he doesn't agree with that. So if we changed it and he won, he wouldn't have to take that, right? He could donate it back to the town if he didn't think that the pay was worth the job, correct?
Yeah, so you always have that option with,
No interruptions, please.
you always have
Mostly
that option where you can, give your salary back to your employer.
Right.
And there's no limitations within our town charter, that you must take the salary.
Great.
Other questions, clarifications, comments? I mean, this is when you want to have this conversation.
I don't know if anybody else.
So I guess I'm thinking from like a fiscal responsibility standpoint. We had some discussions on Saturday about, what is the best and most efficient and effective administrative structure for this town. And I know that's not the question that we necessarily have here, but it's closely related. And considering that, if we ever in a 4-year period are looking to trim costs, I do see some advantages to having an administrative head, because that's at the pay of council. Like council can choose a new town administrator if they're underperforming, whereas an elected official, my understanding is that would have to be a recall election if the community felt that mayor wasn't performing to the level that was expected. So that's just kind of, I guess, two contrasting ways of looking at it. And I guess I'm curious to hear what, council has to think, and if we could have a discussion between those two different kinds.
Also, I don't think we've laid out some of the facts that the current salary for the mayor position, if no changes are made, is $37,500 and no benefits. So we're asking council, do you want to change that for the incoming mayor? And the resolution that is in your packet later on in the meeting we drafted it based on the prior workshop to state that the council hereby sets the mayor's compensation as blank annually when the town administrator position is not actively filled. And number 2, blank annually when the town administrator / town manager, I think we just thought about, position is actively filled, so that the rate would go down to whatever you decided if there was an active town administrator or an active manager, and the rate would be higher at whatever rate you set if there was not. So we're that's where the conversation is. So go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a couple of things. Can you actively filled? I'm assuming that means if you hired a part-time manager or a part-time administrator, that would that a part-time fulfillment be a quote actively filled position?
That's certainly something that we can, if you want to add a different layer here, you can certainly do that. To state that it must be full-time or it must be part-time. The way it's written now is any town administrator, whether they're full-time or part-time, would fulfill the obligations for that threshold to be triggered. And then, so active in that case means any town administrator actively fulfilling the position, meaning their employment is active. It's not, you sent them an offer and they haven't accepted. They've actually started their first day of employment.
And then a quick follow-on question. Correct me if I'm wrong, with the council, if at any point in time can actually hire a town administrator against the wishes of the mayor, at any point in time, if they feel the mayor is not performing the duties of the administration that to their liking, they can, with a majority vote, say, mayor, hire us we're going to hire a town administrator.
Yes.
So I think Councilmember Debner's question was really sort of a future question, right? You're saying you would like to have a conversation about which form of government is better. And I think that this question is really because it's imminent, right? We know that conversation is a conversation that the community needs to have. And we have acknowledged that multiple times and, put that on the future agenda to be considered. How do we go about having that conversation as a town? We nonetheless have to make decisions in tonight's meeting so that they can take effect after the election, this time under these current conditions of this charter. Councilmember Algain?
Can you please clarify that again? So even though we're talking about the proposed salary increase, we could not have a discussion at this table about a proposed manager. And that we would be like to consider that and look at how we could release, lift some of the load.
So if you wanted to hire a town administrator, council could set that direction tonight and we would, staff would have to do it. If you
Not in the workshop, in the regular meeting.
sorry, yes.
Yes.
But council cannot change the form of governance. It can recommend a ballot question, to which it did in last November, saying, voters, do you want to change your form of governance from a strong mayor system to a council manager? That is the only way the form of governance can change.
Yeah, I think I'm referring not to a change in governance, but to hiring a manager.
So yes, you could hire an administrator.
Okay.
Tonight you could give that direction or whenever.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Is there something else that wants to?
I don't think so. I haven't seen that yet.
I just wanted kind of talking about like fiscal responsibility and whatnot. And, we did attempt to hire a town manager, although the roles were all kind of wonky because we hadn't ever had a full-time administrator before. And we kind of put the cart before the horse because we hired our administrator on the presumption that the governance change would pass and that he would take over as the town manager, and which was a much more clear lines of responsibility in terms of like the organizational flow and who's responsible for what. But that salary was substantially higher than I think some of the numbers that we have been just talking about in terms of the potential for the mayoral pay increase, like substantially higher.
With benefits, with a car, with lots of other things.
So just to put the facts out, the town administrator was paid an annual salary of $135,000 plus a $400 a month car allowance. And that was consistent with the market for town managers. And so what we're thinking about, I think what we've learned, and I think that this was part of our clerk's insight, that maybe you don't need a town administrator. Maybe you need a clerk who can manage administrative things well, and you could save on some of that salary cost. And so that's something that she's been, sharing, frankly. And I forgot my train of thought. Yeah.
Would that be a substantial decrease in salary if we were to look at the unicorn?
I haven't been able to prepare all three of those budgetary number options yet since Saturday. But that would be, you would have administrative cost savings there regardless if that's the route you take.
And I think our town attorney has an additional thought too.
And you would have one benefit versus two. Right.
Okay.
And so that all factors into it.
And just to name it, most of the time what you see is a decrease in your consultant costs. So like my costs go down. Like the time I do or the time my paralegal does, your, manager, administrator, whomever, fulfills those duties.
So could you please, I'm go ahead. Okay, so then can you please repeat that? If we had a clerk / manager who was, that would reduce the services for you.
Yeah, I could give an example.
Okay.
So like drafting your resolutions and ordinances, that's something I can teach your administrator or your clerk. And it would probably only take a couple of rounds to teach that. And then that would be a lot less cost. I mean, just to name it, I'm paid more hourly than, anyone else in the room. So you want to reduce my costs to save money.
Okay.
That would be part of your recruitment process for the clerk, is if they have experience doing that, because it is pretty standard in a lot of organizations that the clerk sends the packet over with the ordinances, with the resolutions, you approve his form, and then we move forward that way.
Councilmember Lasher.
But didn't our legal fees go up immensely when we had a town manager?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I guess it doesn't always work out that way, but
Okay.
in theory.
But we're
Okay.
seeing a clerk, a certified clerk or an experienced municipal clerk with management skills. That's one of the reasons why we're trying to sort of emphasize those differently. So let's make sure that we stay on topic here.
Yes.
No, I think it's really, really important and it is tangentially related in every way. But I know this is a hard conversation, right? And we have a lot of people here who have strong opinions. And so it's going to be hard to have a frank conversation, but that's what this workshop is for. So I'm going to call on you in this order. Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a clarifying question. So, if you did have that clerk who knew how to put together all the resolutions and thereby was lowering the costs for the attorney fees for the town, they wouldn't necessarily be a town administrator or manager. They would more be like an office manager type of role. I mean, clarify that for me.
So in a lot of jurisdictions of this similar size, you have like a clerk / administrator or a clerk / administrative services director. It is a role that is filled in municipalities this size all the time. The other key point is if you have someone who's overseeing a lot of the financial functions, you have those different consulting fees that start going down because you're not relying so heavily on them to do the entirety of the budget, to do all of your ordinances and resolutions and packet preps and, all of those things. So that's how it functions in other municipalities.
So I think what Charity's talking about is blending the two positions. You're like having an administrator and clerk potentially being served by the same person if you get someone really qualified who is able to do that.
So just to clarify, in terms of this context, but that wouldn't trigger that newly defined position wouldn't trigger the decrease in the mayoral salary, or would it? I guess is a question I have.
Yeah, I think if you actually hired someone with the title town administrator, then yes, it would. So right now, Charity's fulfilling by the end of the night 2 hats. So if that position ended up filling 3 hats, no matter how many hats that same person's fulfilling, I think it would trigger that decrease.
I'm sorry, we had already a few people with their hands up. Councilmember Lasher.
You just mentioned there's a lot of people in the room, but I feel like you should also acknowledge like emails we're getting from people who don't feel comfortable coming to meetings and speaking. So I feel like we need to acknowledge all of the voices of every resident in town, not just the loudest voices.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councilmember Debner.
I guess I'll just name the thing. So it just seems like the timing of this is very challenging, considering that the candidate petitions are already out. Because, these conversations have impacts on, relationships with neighbors and amongst council. But it shouldn't, right? So I guess I'm just wondering, how do people feel about the timing of this discussion? And if it would be maybe better had at the next mayoral paid rate. I'm just curious.
So I think it's a legal question. We really can't. You have to set it ahead of time.
So you're saying like this next incoming mayor, the next 4 years would be at the current rate?
Yes, I guess that's what I'm saying.
So you're posing that question of would council be more comfortable
Waiting 4 years.
Waiting 4 years. I'm honestly curious of everyone's opinion in regards to that topic.
Councilmember Ralgeen?
Before I answer that question, I'd like to ask, can you share with us what the educational requirements would be for a position that we're discussing?
It's as you said,
Okay.
having gone through this process, I go through it at least twice a year with different clients. I have some that like require sort of a master's degree. I have some that require no degree. I have some that prefer to hire from within and train. With smaller communities, I find that to be more common. There's a lot of town clerks that become town administrators. So it's absolutely up to council's direction, and we can certainly provide all those options and give some examples.
And in terms of your question, Ryan, sorry, Councilmember Debner, I think that it does require further conversation before we make a decision this evening. I think that we need to look at other options, and also, you know, in our charter, there is a particular area where the mayor can delegate specific responsibilities to council members who can help lift the load of work and the hours worked. And I think that this council would be, I'm speaking for you, I apologize. This council member would be more than happy to help in that capacity.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Can I speak to that?
please.
So I do think that we are all a bunch of volunteers, but we also a lot of us have full-time jobs and and families, young children, myself included. And I don't think that's realistic to ask the council to take on additional work that we already have. And also, it's also goes kind of against the council goals of professionalization and standardization when you start sort of having, council members serve as volunteers for work that should be done, by a professional. It doesn't make sense to me. But I appreciate the thinking on it, but I'm not in agreement with that.
One of the things I did at your table settings is I put out a printed copy of your 2025 adopted council goals. And because I do think it's why we're having this conversation tonight, is that the council has consistently sought to build professionalism and continuity in our municipal government. And we've adopted that by resolution twice now, 2 years in a row, that we seek to continuously improve in all different ways and to be proactive and encourage best practices to build and maintain the town's physical environment, to support the police department. We seek to create long-term financial sustainability for our town. And we're committed to fiscally responsible, nonpartisan, respectful governing body efforts that will continuously improve the town. So we seek to improve our knowledge of best practices and our ability to govern in a collaborative, professional manner that acknowledges our duties and responsibilities to lead and represent our community. So those are goals that we can go back to again and again and again and say, how do we do that? How do we get there from here? And so it's why we're having this conversation, because across the board, in every department, in everything that we do, we have continuously sought improvements and professionalism. And when you do that, you increase the workload for your staff, because you go from having a book that holds your ordinances to asking staff to have ordinances codified and available and searchable on your website. And then you have your website is up to date all the time. And then you have your building department holds special meetings, and you have a code on your website or a form on your website that people can submit a pothole request, fill request. And so if you look, I feel like we're talking so theoretically that I just want to try to sort of bring us back to the actuals of the role assets currently written, rather than an assets currently, required. The current town programs and services, this list in your packet. we now have a new addressing policy that's creating consistency and continuity in how the town handles addresses. That in order to have a policy like that, in order to have facilities and property policy, and to put together the presentation that you saw tonight, and to think strategically and long term, you have to have thoughtful strategic conversations, you have to have thoughtful strategic staff, and you have to have thoughtful strategic hands-on supervision. And that's what we're currently doing. And so my experience of the position for any incoming mayor is that under the current circumstances, it is a full-time position. The mayor's workload is laid out in the charter. It's clearly stated in the charter, and that's in your packet as well. And you've got an org chart as well that shows that the mayor is the administrative head of the government. The mayor's responsible for that. And so you can't just say, well, should the mayor be responsible for that? Is there a way that we can change that? Yes, long term there is, but not by the time that the next incoming mayor comes in. And so do you want to have a mayor who is experienced and knowledgeable and capable doing the work that is currently on the plate of the mayor? Councilmember Lasher.
I would just like to ask council, like, if it's a personal thing, because I feel like a long time ago, a few years ago, we all decided that we wanted to pay the police officers well, to retain them, to get the best police officers we could for our town. We wanted the town public works coordinator to be great, and we found someone and we're paying him well. And so I'm just curious, like, why it's like there's so much pushback from like a certain group of when the town has only grown in every aspect. I've lived here. Well, we were paying to keep the lights on. I lived here through Mayor Levy. Lived here through Emily. And it's not about Emily, but our town has gotten so professional. The council has done so many amazing things. And so I'm just curious, like, why there's so much pushback to pay everyone else in our town like a competitive rate, but to pay any mayor that comes in, because I feel like there's a lot of people in our town who could be great, but have said, I will not run because I'm not going to give up my life for 35,000. So I'm just curious, like, what the pushback is. Sorry, can we stop talking? It's very hard to hear up here. Thank you.
May I comment on that? I think that it's important that we as council members be respectful.
Oh, I agree.
And so when we're being accused.
We don't want to hear audible interruptions from the audience again. If we hear that, we will have to ask you to leave.
So when we're being asked if that's a personal issue, I don't believe that it is. I believe that we are being asked to look at what our options are and to really look at what we're doing in terms of providing the best educated services to our town. And also, the increase in salary is unprecedented for a small municipality. So we have the obligation to look at other options and to ask questions. Now, I'm not saying no to anything that we would vote on, and I would imagine everyone at this table would feel the same way. But we are responsible for asking multiple questions and looking what our different options are. And we are doing it in such a short period of time that perhaps we need to, and we look at the org structure, and the org structure are residents first. So we do need to really engage them more to find out what their thoughts are, because they are at the top of the org chart.
I think we've had a lot of input from residents on this. Councilmember Lasher.
Ms. Algene, or Councilmember Algene, you were on council, I believe, when we hired our last town manager, correct? So what made you feel confident in him to be paying him 135 plus a car plus insurance? Like I really like learning from people. So like,
Okay.
I just want to hear everyone's opinion. That's why I talk to all
I'm happy
residents.
to comment on that.
Thanks.
I was not present at that council meeting, so I did not vote for that gentleman. I was out of town, so I was absent.
Okay, sorry, I thought you were wrong.
In terms of fiscal responsibility, one of the thoughts in my mind is that it is more fiscally responsible and more responsive to the voters to have a mayor who lives in town be the administrative head of the government and get paid a reasonable living wage rather with benefits rather than hiring a town administrator at $135,000 a year. So when you said it's unprecedented, the salary raise is unprecedented. We haven't heard any numbers at this table, so I don't know where we can say that it's unprecedented.
I believe that it was mentioned when you discussed your thoughts of not running for council if you didn't receive 60,000. I believe that that's what you said in the workshop.
I said that frankly, but it is not my job to say the number. It's your job to say the number. So I'm trying to be as transparent with everybody as possible. And when I was asked that question, I provided it. But it is your job to say the salary. So that number has not been, that's not my job. That's your job. Ask council to put a number in that blank spot and to say whether or not it includes benefits and what does it go down to if there's a town administrator or town manager.
Can we, could we maybe discuss, the dollar value of the benefit package? Because, total compensation is important when considering, a salary increase in any employment.
I would say financially rule of thumb, you usually budget about $20,000 per employee. That's a rough number. I haven't been able to dive into our benefits as of yet. I'm still working on that. So don't hold me to it, but that's an average standard cost.
And the number that I think we've talked about in workshop is 60,000 with benefits or 70,000 without benefits is a recommendation that I floated.
Can I ask, kind of your motivations or thinking behind that recommendation?
It's personal. Really, I've worked, so this question is really not about me, right? It's about the incoming mayor and what I think I could possibly do that job for another 4 years. So I'm going to get more personal when you ask that question. So for the last 4 years, I have decided to essentially donate my time, right? I've worked for $37,500 annually and no benefits and no retirement. And I'm 57 years old. And I love the work. I'd love to do it again. But I just can't if I can't make some money, if I can't have a paycheck that can support me. My dad has had to not charge me rent. I don't have health insurance. I don't have retirement savings. So I just had to make a personal, what was the lowest I could go and still run and serve a town I love? And that's the lowest I could go. And so I don't know that that's the best answer because I think, frankly, you should go as high as you can go because we should attract the best candidates in town. We really should. This job is an incredibly meaningful job and it's incredibly hard and it takes a full-time focus. And you have to put up with stuff that, you just in your wildest dreams wouldn't imagine you'd have to put up with, but you do. And so we should attract candidates in town who could make a living being the CEO of a small town, because that's how our charter writes the mayor's job. We should pay the mayor so that we can attract qualified people, not just me. other people. She would be great at this job. She would be amazing at this job, but she can't do it because she has a family and she needs health insurance and she needs to bring a paycheck. And it's not fair to ask a mayor to take on this level of responsibility for free. I did it for 4 years. I work 80 hours a week and I've counted my hours. It's 70 to 80 hours a week. And I do it because I love it. But maybe not everybody's going to be able to do that. And I feel very, very honored that I've been able to. But I would love to do it again. But I just personally can't.
I'm just going to be frank here. I think 37,000 for this job for whoever it is that comes in is insulting for the amount of work and the amount of effort that you have to put into keeping a town a town. There is so much that goes into this. And I used to sneer and snicker just like many of you. I sat in the seat thinking, well, why do we need to pay a mayor? What do they possibly do in a town of this size? And I was amazed over the course of my term to see just the level of work and effort it takes to do just the basic day-to-day operations. So if you want to have a town that moves forward and is strong and doesn't get swallowed up, then we need to pay someone a good salary for the professionalism and to continue that. Because if we get a part-time mayor, we will fall. And we already have seen what a part-time mayor looks like.
Councilmember Unger.
Mayor, if the salary were 60,000 with benefits or 70,000 without, then if an administrator was hired, what would that drop to?
That's for the council. That's for the council to decide.
I think she's asking for a recommendation.
Yes,
Since
yes,
I went
I'm-
out on
About numbers now.
Councilmember Dennis. I don't have a recommendation for what to go down to. Yeah. Councilmember Dennis.
Okay, I'm going to start the numbers. Okay. How does everyone feel about 70 with benefits? Opinions? Not yours. You have your chance later. Thank you. Council.
May I speak? I do feel that that is high. And I do feel that we as community service individuals who choose to run for office do so at a dedication to our community. And that many mayors and many council members, aside from us who are retired and those who don't have employment, work and still offer to do community service. And I do want to remind council that yes, we did have mayors who work part-time. But I would like to remind us that past mayors and council members have served this community with dedication. And even if we disagree with how they performed, we need to remain respectful and appreciate the service. I mean, don't you agree?
I think we all are very appreciative of all the service that elected people provide.
And so when I hear that someone worked part-time and we know how that turned out, I feel like that's a disrespectful comment about that particular person who served. Going back, I do believe that 70% with benefits is high based on, again, comparable municipalities. I understand the strong mayor, but also based on historical information that people have other jobs to sustain their income.
Councilmember Unger. We'll just go around the room to try to answer the question that Councilmember Dennis posed.
Would you refresh me with the?
I was asking how you feel about 70 with benefits.
I've been on council for almost 2 years,
Right into your mic.
filling in for the person I took over for. And I have been astonished at what is encompassing in the mayor's position, whomever it would be, but this mayor in particular. And what I have seen is even behind the scenes, I have been astonished at the amount of work it is. Now, the person who gets the mayoral position after election? Would that person put in the hours? Would that person have the dedication? And what if they don't? Then is council going to be in a position to say, hey, you know, you got this benefits package, you got all this money, and you're not doing the proper job? Then what kind of position we're going to be in? If you want good people, the qualified people, and the workload has increased and immensely over the years from what it was 5 years when I just lived here 7 years now, and when Levy was here, and the workload and the technology and the things you need to run this place now is certainly much more difficult, more training, harder to do, takes longer hours. And I am definitely in favor of a pay raise.
How do you feel about the rate that she named, 70,000 with benefits?
Oh, we maybe could compromise at 65.
Mayor Pro Tem?
So I feel a little singled out by the mayor earlier.
I'm sorry.
For those of you who don't know, I finished my doctorate in public affairs from the University of Colorado, Denver in December of 2024. I teach people who go on to be city managers. I've only taught one course so far because I was so consumed with writing a dissertation, working full time, being on council and raising a child that I didn't teach anymore. But that's on the horizon once my employment situation stabilizes. I'm a full-time federal employee, for those that don't know. I have not ever really strongly considered to run for mayor, even after serving for 8 years on council, because I see what goes into that role. And that is not great work-life balance. And it's not for someone who wants to have a kid and do all the other things that I like to do. But it's also like, it's not sustainable financially to have that rate of pay with the hours involved. And yeah, you could go ahead and hire an administrator. The council could make that decision, and the future council could make that decision. It probably will cost more money. So I'm also in favor of paying people what they're worth. And I've heard from a lot of people on both sides of this equation. And it's interesting that the people that typically are not supportive of the increase are here. And the ones that I have heard from have emailed me directly. Multiple people have reached out to me and have frankly stated they don't feel comfortable coming because they're worried about, just the sort of level of vitriol we've achieved in this town. And that's really saddening to me. I don't want to have people's voices silenced and feel like they cannot contribute to the dialogue because they don't feel like there's space for them. I just wanted to make that point as well. So I've heard from a lot of people, and honestly, I wouldn't do the job for the rate of pay. And I'm running for re-election, and I'm happy with my position. It will be my third term if I'm reelected. You all will make that decision based upon whatever your nomenclature is, but I wouldn't do the job of mayor for the pay at the current rate.
How do you feel about the number that that our Councilmember Dennis floated?
I think I'm more kind of in line with what Councilmember Unger had stated. I'm open to discussion.
So more in line with 65K in benefits. Councilmember Lasher?
Yeah, I would never do this job ever for all the harassment and just pure hate you get. So I applaud you for all the things you've done for the town. And I agree with Councilmember Bailey. It's heartbreaking to read emails from our neighbors who are scared to come because they're afraid they're going to get, harassed on their property, bricks thrown at their houses, people yelling at them, people cussing at them on the street. It is very sad. And it's horrible. And exactly like this. Thank you for pointing it out.
Interruptions, please.
Thank you. So Emily, or the mayor, whoever it is, I think that they deserve 70 plus benefits, 100%.
Councilmember Debner?
I just want to speak to that, it's important that when we're at the table talking about our constituents that we speak, with an understanding that people can have strong opinions on opposite side and respectfully. And I think, you know, there can be some confusion and misunderstandings between people when, you know, there's not room for conversation. And sometimes those conversations are hard. And there's a lot of tension in the room when, you know, members of the public come and maybe disagree with some of the decisions on council, but that doesn't make their voice, you know, any less important. I mean, yeah, there are lines, but it's also important to understand that, you know, everyone's a person too.
Right, but when people don't feel comfortable coming because of the atmosphere that we're allowing, that's very unacceptable.
How many,
May I
no,
make a comment,
just a
please?
minute, I'm speaking. How many public comments did we, no inaudible interruptions? We have to take turns here for the record. Everybody has a chance to speak. And I am in the middle of a comment, not meaning to be disrespectful. How many community members did each of you hear from on this topic? Could we summarize, should we estimate how many community members we heard from roughly?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I physically went door to door and I had many conversations that ranged from an hour to 3 hours. And I would say this is a drop in the bucket. But after I calculated all of the individuals that I spoke with, it was close to 40.
So we have had a pretty sustained conversation with the community, sounds like. So you've heard a lot. How about the rest of you? We have a comment, a public comment on the table. We had 3 public comments in the packet. We had several public comments at the meeting, and we are going to have public comments during the regular session. So I'm just trying to speak to some of the points that we've brought up where we're saying it's too soon, you know, it's too fast to have this conversation. We should kick the bucket down the road, or kick the can down the road. We need to have more conversation. So we've had a lot of conversation. We're having a conversation now. We've got members of the public that have been deeply engaged, have taken a lot of time to write letters and share them. So I feel like on that line, we've had a lot of input. We are way over time at this point. Are there other things that we need to sort of think about and address before we adjourn from our workshop? And then we'll have the conversation again during the regular meeting when we consider the ordinance, which, by the way, takes 2 readings. Councilmember
I
Algain?
have 2 questions. When we talk about looking for a qualified candidate pool in town who has lived here for a year, who wants to run for mayor, I'm curious what that percentage would be in the town to get those qualified individuals to be interested in running. And then my second question is, as we weigh the decision, is it worth asking our town, how would it affect our administrative, staff administrative costs by adding an additional 35,000 plus the 20,000 that you mentioned possibly for benefits? How would that affect that budget line?
So the benefits would be a wash because you budgeted last year for a town administrator's benefits. And then the budget line item would also be substantially decreased because you wouldn't be having the $135,000 for the town administrator. You would add 35 to the mayor's pay. And so that's where the numbers would shake out. Because it's my understanding, based on all these discussions, as long as you don't have somebody to fill that administrative role, the pay is increased. But once you do, then it's decreased. But you'll also have the added increased cost of another administrative personnel. So the benefits would remain the same regardless. The pay would fluctuate based off of what the council's direction is on how they want to proceed with the administrative staffing structure. Thank you.
Other burning desires to express your thoughts before we move on to our regular meeting?
I guess I just want to acknowledge that I heard from residents on both sides. This is, understandably a difficult conversation to have, especially, knowing some of the potential candidates that are, potentially on the ballot. Not yet, but candidate petitions. I think there's maybe for prospective candidates, depending on our decision, how much time would they have? 10 days to turn in a packet?
The packets have to be received in the town clerk's office by 5 PM on the 25th.
Okay. So I guess, it's this town has changed. I will acknowledge that there's a lot of services in operation here. And ultimately, I think it comes down to, it's important to remember that this is a conversation not about, the current position. This is for the next 4 years. That's the decision that we're making as a council. And so we need to just consider our position as fiscal responsible for the community and the tax dollars, how they're spent. But we also need to consider the scope of the services that this town offers and their efficiency in the future budget. That's, I guess, something that I was hoping to maybe understand a little bit more is have data as far as, what actual activities on a day-to-day basis from your perspective or from the mayor's perspective do they perform? Because I think it's, most important to make data-driven decisions. And I understand that, we have this decision to be made tonight. And, that gives a short time frame for any qualified candidates who are interested in running to join the race.
I'll tell you one thing, that is not going to show that a mayor's making 37,000. A lot more than that.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I didn't hear can you speak into the mic? No, I'm sorry. I didn't catch it. Yeah. I might not have just processed it.
Oh. No, I said, according to data, you're not going to find any mayor that is full-time for 37,000. It just doesn't happen.
Right. But I think what he's saying is that if we increase the salary and we're trying to recruit candidates, that we still have a very short time period, which I think is accurate, which is one of the reasons why we need to pass it and move it forward.
I just don't feel like it should take that much time to figure out that a pay increase is needed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But also, this is an ordinance that requires 2 separate readings. So there's still time to, rally up your candidates and what have you for the mayor by the time before it passes, because we still have to have a second reading.
The candidate packets have to be in.
Right.
That's the deadline.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but I mean, if we push this forward and we approve the first reading of the ordinance, they give people the direction to go, and you could withdraw from a race too if it doesn't end up happening, that people can withdraw from the race and not be on the ballot, as far as I've understood.
Okay. So I think we've gotten a lot of information out on the table for our workshop purposes. We have completed our workshop for now. If everybody give me a few minutes here of patience while I shuffle my papers. There being no further business on our workshop agenda, the workshop is adjourned at 9:18 PM. We'll take a 10-minute break and we'll come back here for our regular meeting.